great company and just really humbled to be here and to share a point of view that really does span a lot of different companies and industries. Wanted to quickly introduce DPR Construction. What I'm appreciating about this company, that I joined in June, so I onboarded virtually as a leader in a new industry, and the culture for learning is fantastic. At the core, it's learn something new every day, share what you learn. And so when I saw that, their tagline, we exist to build great things and who we build is as important as what we build, I knew that I was in the right place to do some great things and build great things. Today's session, we're going to talk about the response to all of the crazy changing environments and the demands that it's putting on people to acquire knowledge and skills, and also how they're learning differently and practicing differently. Definitions of upskilling and reskilling and career pathing. Sometimes we use these terms interchangeably, so I'd like to just clarify that the differences. In support of that, the competency architecture for that upskilling, reskilling, and career paths, and how we can measure performance to business results. And then finally, learning and development's role in support of that, and the content strategy that supports all of those, upskilling, reskilling, and career pathing. And of course, I'm going to leave some time for Q&A. So in 2018, McKinsey forecasted that 75 million jobs would be displaced 2 years from now, 1 year from now, in 20 major global economies. This was forecasted before COVID. 133 million new roles are expected to be created. I actually saw another data point that 2/3 of kindergartners today, so kindergartners, 2/3 of them will be working in jobs that don't exist today. So that just gives you an example of how it's changing. And I know you've probably seen similar data, but all of this requires reskilling and upskilling. It's no longer an option. It's really what every company needs to do to remain competitive. We were talking about the talent shortage and skill gaps a decade ago, and now it's just accelerated. So the pace across the world, every industry, and I'm sure we have financial services here, manufacturing, construction, healthcare, all of the industries. McKinsey also said that it's estimated that France will require 80,000 more IT and electronics workers. You've seen that Amazon is investing in upskilling 100,000 of their employees. Salesforce has similar initiatives with upskilling and reskilling their employee group. Data scientists, all of the digital transformation careers and skills are coming to the forefront with huge demand. And in the UK, 23% of people are lacking those basic digital skills. These are things like digital literacy, things that you and I might take for granted, like how to use a mouse, how to access email, how to set up a profile, password protection, things that are essentially very basic to the digital work that we're doing. And then we tag on, our environment of distractions and media and technology, and we realize we get about 24 minutes a week where learners can actually focus on skilling and upskilling. And I want you to hold on to that, because later on we're going to be talking about learning in the flow of work. It's essential that we do not make training an event, because that event would be 24 minutes a week. We've got to find a way to weave it into the just the DNA of how we do work through performance support, microlearning, etc. But what do we do that? How do we do that? Bob Mosher talks about the 5 points of need, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. When you learn something for the first time, I think about our new hires and onboarding. When you need to learn more, this is essentially upskilling. when you need to apply what you've learned, when things go wrong, which it's the negative path of excursions and errors. And then finally, when things change, and I think based on the previous slides, you would agree, things are always changing. That when things change is constant now. So let's look at the definitions of upskilling and reskilling just to align. Upskilling is the process of learning new skills or teaching workers new skills in their current career or role. So this is just the constant evolution of how people do their current job. Reskilling is the process of getting them ready and developing new skills for an evolving job design, a new or different job. As job designs change, it could be due to robotics, it could be due to technology, it could be due to circumstances like COVID. I mean, you think about all of the pivots of job designs that have happened. Reskilling really looks at adjacent skills that they can build on, transferable skills that are close to that. Of course, if you don't have a snapshot of the current skills, how are you going to know if they have adjacent skills for this new opportunity? For another PwC, quote here, 4 out of 5 CEOs identified their employees' lack of essential skills as a threat to their business growth. So talent is actually one of the more gating factors or barriers to entry in new markets, in business expansion. That, even if the demand for the business is there, the talent readiness isn't. And I think we're all seeing that. So career pathing is about meeting future demand, certainly identifying the capabilities for people now. Both reskilling and upskilling strategies, can be part of your career path. Successful career pathing strategies are really derived from competency-based approach, which we'll talk about. And it allows your organization to evaluate current and future needs and close those gaps. But what really I enjoy and what I've seen with career paths is this last one around when you invest in people's development and you acknowledge their current skills and their areas of development and provide them with career paths, it sends a message that you care and it increases engagement. It reduces stress that, wow, I'm going to get replaced by some new college graduate who, has these skills instead of me staying and developing those same skills internally. In talent, we talk about the 5 B's. Do we buy? Do we borrow? Do we build? Do we broker? Or do we bounce? These are our choices with our existing talent. And, DPR, we're builders. So we do believe in building the talent. But there's a time, too, when you need to actually source it externally, which is the buy, borrow, broker with consultants, or different burst capacity opportunities to fill those gaps. Now, what's L&D's role in addressing these skill gaps? I listed them here: awareness, just being aware of how the workforce planning and workforce is changing in support of business. We must assess in some way, and this is where it's part of the total talent picture. We have to know what the current workforce's skill levels are based on competencies to be able to reveal the gaps. And I'll show you more on that shortly. L&D can be at the heart of the strategy to address these gaps as the organization develops these activities for upskilling and reskilling, and also the time frame that it's going to take. What many industries are running into right now is by the time we develop these skills to meet to fill the gaps that we need, the time that it takes to do that, there would be more change that would inform readiness there. And so many companies, and I'm sure even represented in this call, are trying to figure out how can we leapfrog? How can we leapfrog ahead and not just build for the gaps that we have today, but also understand the emerging skills of tomorrow so that we're not constantly chasing and we're not constantly reactive and behind. And so the framework that I'll share might help with that. Acceptance. This is hard. People get very, I mentioned the stress of change on people just in general right now in our environment. Um, so much change is being thrust upon them. It doesn't feel safe to hear that you need to upskill or that your job design could be evolving and changing, and that new skills need to be developed for people who have been performing at a high level for a very long time, very secure in their roles. And so getting acceptance for this is probably the hardest and most important piece. How we position this for people uh, in a way that uses data, but also uses heart. Um, People need to feel safe that, yes, I can step out of my comfort zone and build these new skills while I'm in my current role. What we don't want to do is say, now you're going to do this, figure it out. Um, so having that safe space to learn and practice, not every culture, not every company culture supports this. And I recognize that. And it makes it very, very hard. So if leadership supports that, and um, we as leaders in talent and L&D acknowledge this responsibility, then I think it's an easier road to upskill and reskill. I could go on with this bullet for a very, very long time. As you can tell, it's very near to my heart. Um, I've seen people who became a bit irrelevant in the roles. I mentioned that I've been in L&D for an embarrassingly long time. That reveals my age, and it is a struggle to stay relevant and constantly reading and constantly staying fresh and knowing what's happening and applying those skills and trying it out and failing forward sometimes. Um, I feel the vulnerability for myself, and I feel the vulnerability for the people who we serve. So competency architecture is essential in order to get a snapshot of current compared to future to close those skill gaps. A best practice is for each job to have no more than 9 to 12 competencies. Imagine if you said to someone, you need to know and master these 30 things. No job description should have 30 things, but I do see that. I see this laundry list of skills or applications that people need to be able to use in job descriptions. And essentially, we want some alignment between the skills that we put forth in the job description, in the training and development, in the performance feedback, in the succession planning, which also informs comp and ben. So it really is this integration of all of the different HR and talent functions that we know. At the core competencies, you see things like integrity. Um, you see the values of the company. Then there's another layer of job family competencies. Those might be accounting and finance, operations, sales and marketing. Where we really have an impact in upskilling and reskilling is when we define job specific competencies. And then, of course, on the top, you can see that we layer leadership competencies. And at least in one company, there's one leadership competency for every employee. Other companies only reserve leadership competencies for people in leadership roles. But if you believe that every employee is a leader, then you could have a progressive scale of self-leadership, leading others, leading teams, leading organizations, and leading the industry. And the competencies that go within the scope of that progression really do inform your management leadership development programs, all the way from employees to general managers and CEOs. So that's just a snapshot of a best practice for architecture. It varies by industry, I'm sure. And I'm completely agnostic to which HR platform you use. This is an example of one that shows target levels in green. So for this person's job, building talent, they need to be at a level 4, and they are at a level 4. You can see under communication, the goal is a level 4, but their performance feedback said they're a level 3. We know that if this were a technical skill, that we would be able to, or a people skill, we can close this gap at the individual level with some targeted training. But we can also aggregate this kind of data organizationally and serve as a business consultant to the leadership to say, did you know that for this role, the 2 biggest skill gaps are in these areas? Are we seeing impacts in our business indicators that align to those gaps? Well, yeah, that makes sense. If we're in sales, if we're not generating enough leads, if that's the gap, then of course our funnel looks different, and we should be able to measure a difference in our funnel if we have, higher quality lead generation all the way through. I'm using a sales example, but it could really be in any organization. And this is how L&D becomes that strategic consulting partner with the talent team to prioritize not just training investments, but also back to those 5 Bs that I talked about. Do we need to bring in external talent? It also facilitates movement within job families. And actually, I don't have the illustration here, but even from job family to job family, there's some transferable skills that would, illustrate to people, hey, you may have started as an office manager, but from there, you've got 3 different paths depending on where you would like to grow and learn. This example is for the accounting, finance, and reporting control job roles within that family. And you can see that if someone is a level 4 in the competencies, they can pivot and grow. And this creates a path for people that engages them and builds loyalty, that they see, oh, I can have a long career here. This company is going to invest in me. And we do have a culture of learning. From here, the career paths go even further. You can see account manager really has 3 different options. They could go on to be a regional sales manager, a customer service manager, or a business development manager, and all the way up to VP of sales. That's one path, but there are others. And so this is conceptually a way to illustrate career paths within your company. We call them ladders. I think back in the 80s and 90s, they were job ladders. Now they're journeys and they're paths. And recognizing that we are serving a broad generational span of employees in our companies, we do know that younger generations in our workplace do like a little bit more of a prescriptive path than maybe what older generations expected as part of their career. And then all of this informs our content strategy that supports the competency framework. And you can see, on-demand learning and video resources for the 5 points of need that we talked about, performance support, when something's new, when something's changing. It's not an event, it's in the workflow. And then what will never